There we go. I grew up most of my life in Thunder Bay until I moved to Toronto for university. I did my undergrad in political science and Indigenous studies, and I'm now doing my PhD in political science and Indigenous studies, and specifically looking at the role that youth play in social movements and movement politics. So that's my area of expertise and what I spend most of my days doing. And I've also been a community organizer and somebody interested in organizing spaces since I was a teenager. I sometimes think about I was lucky to have like parents who were very involved in like their local unions when I was younger. And so this was like, since I was like a kid, I remember like being on the picket lines with my parents and stuff like that as like this kind of first entry point into organizing. And I also grew up in a time when like everybody was getting their first Facebook accounts at like 12 years old and everything like that. So not quite like an iPad kid era, but like just before it. And so I feel like of a lot of these like folks, this almost a bilingualism, right? Of like, I remember a world pre-internet and pre-social media in the way that we have it now, but also have had to learn and see how it's evolved to take such a huge part of our lives and our thinking and how it intersects with things like organizing, like I've mentioned, I'm so interested in. So that's a little bit about me and what gets me here. I'm going to share some slides with you. I was telling Sarah when this started that I found this template called Digital Nostalgia. And so I was thinking back to that, like, yeah, 2011 Facebook era, Microsoft at its beginnings. And I was like, it's perfect. So that's this slide template, if you're wondering. And what I figured we're going to do today is start like very, very basic. I know that there's people coming in this room with like varying levels of expertise. And also the team at Platform mentioned to me that some of the folks that were interested in this sort of programming are starting at like the very basis and like want to build from there. So we're gonna start, like I said, I think at the beginning, and then if folks throughout have like want to take the conversation in a different direction or maybe have a question that goes beyond the scope of what I'm giving here, I'm more than happy to also talk about that together and figure out if we can dig into something that's more relevant for people. But to start, this is what I was thinking is I want to have a conversation about three areas related to digital safety and security, and then we can go from there. So one is just an overall conversation about digital hygiene, which I will explain more thoroughly, and try and think about like how could we each create a digital hygiene checklist for ourselves. A lot of this advice that I'm going to hopefully leave you with today is about how you can build routines and practices into your daily life that makes you more secure in the internet and also makes being in this online world less daunting because you've regularized some of the protections for yourself. So starting with digital hygiene, and moving into ethical engagement. So, Sarah at the beginning was also mentioning about AI. I wanted to talk about that a little bit there, how AI is changing our online landscapes and how we can maybe engage with that more ethically if it's possible at all. And also about mental health as a form of security on the internet and burnout and feeling the stress that comes with surveillance and anxiety and feeling like you have to be online all the time as another form of safety that I don't think often gets talked about in the same way as we do. Like you have to two-factor authenticate things, you know, but I think is still pretty integral. So that's the plan. And like I said, if at any point, not even just at the Q&A, you want to maybe pause or talk, stop and say something, or you're like, Riley, you're talking way too fast, or whatever it might be, just throw up a hand or throw it in the chat, and I'll keep an eye out there. So, with that said, let's get started. And I wanted to start with a question because I think it's first important to establish that online organizing, while people have different feelings about it, and some of them and some people question the importance of online spaces and the actual impact that online spaces can have in organizing practices, I do think that there are a lot of values to it. And I think I'm sure people who showed up today also think that. And so I wanted to like ground us by asking like, can we think of our earliest memories or an impactful memory of being politicized by an online space, um, and how the internet has maybe interacted with your own sort of organizing practices, if it has. Anybody, feel free to type it out in the chat or just shout it out. I was asking my sister this, if I this maybe springs anything to people's minds. And she mentioned Coney 2012. Do you remember this, everyone? Right? And I know like there's a lot of stuff that came out after about the guy who created that movement and whatever. But I think for a lot of people that was a super early memory of like YouTube, and it was YouTube and Facebook and like all of these social media platforms that really mobilized and spread awareness and like translated to donations and to offline sort of awareness campaigns. And it was certainly, I think, a political moment for folks. In the chat, I remember the days of forums where people were talking about the Iraq war. Nice. Yeah, totally. Um, and I think Reddit still is like another forum-esque space, right? Where people are still engaging in conversation, long form conversation often, more so than just like the picture bites that we see on something like Instagram or the 140 characters on X or Twitter or whatever. So yeah, that's great. Tumblr. I remember a lot of getting my news back in the day from Tumblr when I was in high school. Um, for me, it's early Facebook, talk about provincial and federal elections. Things seemed easier then. For real, for real. This is great. This is very tough for me to remember. Maybe something from MySpace. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think about a specific MySpace related related commentary I might remember. Um, yeah. So I think it might take a second to recall these moments in time, but part of the reason it is also so difficult is because like I've mentioned, the internet has become such a regularized part of our lives that like, and we do get so much of our news there, and that we build these communities that inform us and whose work we follow and all of those things that we forget that at one point in the time it was like this very brand new sort of way of engaging people, and for organizers to take up this tool. Oh, Rise Up email list before the days of Facebook. I remember those too. More recent, I played Mario Kart online and I've seen a lot of usernames with MAGA or Trump. Yeah, video games as like a whole other separate thing about it. I didn't know Mario Kart was having this happen, but I feel like I remember my little brother, for example, playing like Fortnite and that being, something that would happen there. Indie media. Okay. I love this reminiscing. So, yes, I think we can all agree that we have been impacted by online political work and political activism. Um, and so, what is the point of online organizing? How does it connect us to traditional activism? It's not just about accumulating follower counts on a social backdrop. I think that online organizing is about facilitating collective action, and the internet is just one tool in an activist's toolbox, right? It's one that's important, and it's one that is, that has many facets to it. But it is not in and of itself social action, though we can use it for social action. And I think that there are many sort of values that we can strive to uphold when we organize online in order to make the most out of this tool that we have. So one, and I think that this is like a common conversation people have these days, is like when you're in online spaces, are you there because you're actually trying to mobilize people, or are you there for some level of performance or social clout? Like I feel like this is a debate that I see again and again, even as maybe recently or as prominently in my mind as like the Black Lives Matter summer and the black squares that were on Instagram. And people, for a lot of people, this was them trying to say I'm engaging in a form of online collective action, but then there was a whole bunch of debates about the performance versus the non-performance. And so we continue to have that conversation. But in general, seeing the internet for what it is a tool. Also, strategy, that just like any other tool, we have to use it strategically. Sometimes it makes the most sense, sometimes it doesn't. And that is, I think, the backbone of all forms of activism and all the mediums that we have to use it with, and that we use it for a specific goal. And the strategies help us reach those goals, but ultimately, we should be trying to achieve something, more so than just like wanting to have commentary on something, right? And so these are some of the things that come up for me when I think about like how can the internet be a meaningful place, and what are some of the things that we have to do to make it a meaningful place. I don't know if anything else stands out for folks. Like when you see a post and you're like, I feel like that's important versus like, is this just fluff on my feed? You know, is there anything that folks reflect on that way? If not, that's okay too. Mhm. Like I can give a second in the chat and come back to it as well. So, um, with that all in mind, the importance of social media and the internet as a tool established, um, here are some of the things, again, I want to talk about in being safe while using this tool. So the first is digital hygiene. Um, Digital hygiene is basically a practice of keeping your online world in check so that you can build security, create sufficient privacy controls for you, and essentially not have this tool work against you for the benefit of bad actors. Um, More to that point, I love this like retro Club Penguin get like transparent I found. I was really sent to a place when I found it. So what is digital hygiene? According to the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, digital hygiene is this big catch-all term for any sort of practice or behavior related to cleaning up and maintaining your digital world. And so there's a very long list of things that we can all do to improve our digital hygiene. And some of these probably seem intuitive to a lot of people. But as much as like I'll say, even though they are intuitive to me and I maybe know I should be doing that, do I always actually regularly do these things to keep my digital world clean? Not always, I'll admit. So reviewing all of the privacy and account settings for the services that we use online so that we can ensure that we aren't willingly giving away information that we don't have to. I think until you do that, I think there was on Instagram, was I saw an infographic going around a couple months ago where they were like, you know, you can opt out of a lot of the targeted ads they might give you, for example, or some data collection measures that they have. But we don't always take the time to go and look through those things, and limit what we're willingly giving away to like these big corporations. And so that's one big thing for sure. This is where I have my Club Penguin coming in, is deleting all of your old accounts. I don't even want to think about all of these old inactive accounts and things like that that I have floating out on the internet. But that I think it would be somewhat easy, at least, for me to go through, and try and eliminate these like old lives basically that I've had on online, right? And because a lot of folks that we're talking to right now who also, like me, the internet came into their lives during this like really young stage of development, is that there's a lot of things on there that like we definitely forget about, that we created when we didn't have a full consciousness about what internet safety is, or what even the internet would turn out to be in the way that it has, that we should really be, I think, more conscientious of. Um, and of course, practicing password protecting not just your devices and your accounts, but also your files and stored information. And with that, I want to add, specifically related to protest safety, is that there's been a lot of calls recently, for folks to eliminate, for example, the biomedical information that you put, as a way to protect your devices. So like for example, if anybody has a MacBook, you probably know you can put like your fingerprint on it, right, to turn it on or off. Or like if your iPhone and you can use facial recognition to turn it on or off. Um, in a lot of places, uh, for example, if you get arrested at a protest and somebody, a police officer takes your phone, for example, it's very easy for them to just like hold it up to your face and have access to that, right? As opposed to if you didn't have those sorts of facial recognition or fingerprint recognition tools set up, uh, things that we've set up for the convenience of ourselves, but don't actually necessarily protect our safety, specifically if we're doing like more challenging work. So a call to remove facial and finger and all of those sorts of forms of recognition has been going around. Um, OMG Neopets, Habbo Hotel. Yes. I love these. Um, I was talking to my partner about this and they were like, wow, like I forgot about Neopets. I was like a Neopet czar like on there when I was younger. And I'm like, you have to go delete that. It's wild. Um, yeah. So these are just some things that I can think of. As we're going through, and we're going to talk more about digital hygiene in a second, but like maybe if you can think either for yourself or feel free to put it in the chat, like other things, other general digital hygiene practices that are good to have on our radar, that people, might again know to do, but don't actually prioritize it in their day-to-day life. Feel free to add those out there. So, why is it important? Um, the benefits of the internet are bountiful, yes, but the basis is that we are always working against bad actors. And that could be, yes, like individuals who use the web for nefarious use, or individuals and organizations, people who dox, people who want to get your personal information for their own devices, yes. Or just more certainly and more generally is the fact that a lot of the internet is monopolized and that the people that own much of the internet and much of the internet infrastructure, they don't work for us, right? They work for profit. They work for their shareholders, and they inevitably mediate so much of our interactions. And so, with that assumption in place, it's really important that we do what we can to protect ourselves despite the inevitability of working with this in this imperfect system. And in that way, isn't the internet kind of like just like this one microcosm of our larger world, right? Like where so much of our interactions in our daily life are mediated, we know, by bad actors, by the for-profit corporations we rely on and work for governments that don't always seem to have the best interests of their constituents in mind. The internet is no different. And so, in the same way that we take precautions in our daily life, it's important to think about the internet as a physical space, right? Where that also can take place. Um, from yesterday's workshop, Layla adds, Amira shared the importance of doing regular updates to your devices if you're able and as often as there are security patches. I had no idea. Yeah, that's a great point. Not just accepting all cookies when visiting a website. Yeah, I don't know how many times I'm just like, yeah, get it off my screen, the pop-up. But it's bad. It's bad practice. Um, Another one I think is going to come up here, but is like regularly going through your emails and like unsubscribing from these things that you might not have even remembered giving your contact information away to. But that's another thing that I do regularly. Turning off your mic and camera from apps when you're not using it. Yeah, being aware of surveillance from Google while using Chrome. These are great. And I know my little brother made fun of me, but like I sometimes put like a little sticker above my camera, right? Just because like what does it hurt me also to have that there, if nothing other than just like add another layer of protection, right? Little things like that. And I think that they actually have developed like you can get them I can't think of the company off of my top of my head. If anyone has, let them know. But like it's like a little clip that you can just like put on to your laptop to do it so you're not like sticker rubbing on it like I was doing. But that people, yeah, have created tools to try and help us do that more easily. So, two ideas I also want to talk about, especially, are first of all, encryption. Some people know about encryption, but if you're like a really beginner, again, to thinking about digital safety, maybe it's a newer idea. And so we specifically want to look for devices that can support us with end-to-end encryption. And so that's a security feature that helps keep your communication secure. Specifically, end-to-end is important because while some services offer a level of encryption, they only might do that like one way, meaning what's it called? What you send is safe, but not necessarily what you receive. And with either end of those communications, you can still learn a lot about a person, right? And their interactions, and you can still gain a lot of very sensitive data that way. And so there are services like Signal, I think stands out as a very popular one. There are other Android specific messaging services, especially that you can use. And so you want to ensure that nobody other than those that you're contacting can see the messages that you're sending. And again, that's an especially important thing for organizing when you might be sending out specific details about like, where are you going to meet? What are sort of your targets that you want to achieve? And sensitive information that I'm sure a lot of people who are anti your protest would love to have those details on, right? So it's an important security feature in that way. And like I said, just routinizing digital hygiene. Can you dedicate, it's a task, a call to us all, myself included, but can you dedicate at least an hour every few months to a digital hygiene checklist? Unsubscribing, changing your passwords, adding accounts to authenticating apps. Also performing regular social media and search audits on yourself. Um, this is something that it always like maybe we do secretly for not necessarily for security purposes, but is something we could do with security purposes in mind is like, yeah, Googling yourself. Look at the apps that you have on your phone, like Facebook and Instagram and all of those, and put your name in there and see what's coming up. My mom did this and she found out that there was like this whole other like cryptocurrency account using her name and photo and all of these things that she like they had no followers and like at this point had like no reach or anything like that. But she just like had no idea that this was happening until somebody sent her that DM and was like, "Hey, I think somebody's using your information for whatever." And it had been an active account, I think, for like 6 months or something. And it was one of those things that if she had just been performing like these like regular checks, like maybe she could have either privatized her account sooner or she could have reported it sooner. In any case, had more information that could help her earlier on. So that's one of the other things I would add to the list. Uh, Anything standing out for folks about digital hygiene or any stories that folks might have of when digital hygiene helped them? Maybe also a good time to do it. Yes, Sarah?
There's some comments in the chat.
Oh,
Also,
are
if
they?
you want to speak, if you raise your hand, I can unmute you.
Oh, perfect. I think if their comments are in the chat, they might just be going to you. I only see Marsha's as the last one. Okay. Oh, good. Oh, there we go. Are there any password managers you recommend? Yeah, so like I know that there are like for example, Google and Microsoft has one, but these are sort of the corporations that we've also been talking about that aren't necessarily the most trusted with our information. There are some indie ones that exist out there that I believe I have on the last slide. Actually, I have a full resource slide for you folks at the end. So I'll make a note in my brain to remember to point those out specifically. But any level of them will help. So even the not so nice like Google and Microsoft ones. Um, There's also this app, a multi-factor authentication app called Duo, that a lot of like universities and nonprofits use. So if you're looking for a multi-factor to set up as well, that can be a helpful one. Um, yeah, that's another thing is a lot of people don't realize too is that like you can make multi-factor authentication for a lot of your things. We often only do it when like, for example, our bank makes us or like, we have some websites that make us do multi-factor authentication, but it's something that we can also set up for ourselves often through some services. So that's a good point as well. Okay. Maybe I'll move to the next one, and then if anything again pops up for folks, we can circle back. Oh, but first, RE digital hygiene. I was quite surprised to see that what can be found in face search engines like Pim Eyes. Oh, that's a great piece of advice. So going through and looking um, through this site to see, like, I guess that search audit piece. I don't know if there's anything that you found particularly interesting of what you were able to find, Marcia, but that's a really cool suggestion. All good. I won't put you on the spot too much anymore, also. Pictures of myself, images that it thought were of me. Yeah. I hope everybody's like, I'm sure the next browsers are up in people's phones right now, being like, hey, who am I here? Oh, here. Thanks, Sarah, for putting in also one of the password managers there, KeyPass. Cool. This is for people, important for people who don't want their image online. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's like a huge surveillance point as well, right? And so when I'm talking about like, yeah, don't give just your face away to your phone, for example, like you wouldn't want those images that, especially with AI, can be like propagated and used and are difficult to control. With that said, I think it's also important, as much as you're doing digital hygiene checks on yourself, you're reminding me that is to like think about the people in your life, especially the closest people in your life, who have some of your information, who have your face on their profiles, who have, again, basically a digital presence of you through them, and to ensure that they have safety there too. I notice that this is also like a practice that's becoming more and more popular in like parent circles, for example, where there's like a growing movement of people to say like I don't want photos of my kid online, and like that's something that a lot of people have come to like respect from parents, but I also think it makes sense to is a fine boundary to uphold, like beyond just like child age people, to say like if you don't want your face there, it's become very normalized to just like take pictures of people and to publish things and not necessarily check in with your friends. And so making sure that other people around us also have consent in digital hygiene is a good practice as well. All right, let's rock. So, ethical engagement. How do we spend time online in ways that uphold our values? To me, this is like a very important piece in terms of the feelings of security, in that like I can often find being online overwhelming. I'm intimidated, I think, by what I mentioned before about like the fact that there are so many bad actors that mediate my online interactions, and so having some level of awareness about like who do I want to be in an online space? Where are my limits for what I will engage with and won't engage with? And what are things that I should be skeptical of is really helpful personally. So that's why I have this whole section for you here. And this is from like a US based nonprofit, but that they have these four pillars of ethical digital engagement: transparency, accessibility, inclusivity, and follow up. And we'll talk more about them, but that basically the main heart of it all is that to be a really a strategic and impactful online organizer, it's about building authentic communities and building trust, and that's something that gets very lost in today's online media culture, which is very much about like clicks and views and shares and what actual marketing professionals would call like vanity metrics, that don't necessarily equate to like a really meaty community building that actually is responsive and meets goals. What does it matter if you have 1,000 people who see your things, right? Or you have this many followers if they don't show up in real ways and tangible ways for your community? So we're getting into more of, I think, like an organizing ethos here. So, first, we're going to talk about AI. I had this one meme I was going to put here, of Scully. And it says, "Yeah, I use AI, actual imagination." I thought it made me chuckle. But in any case, I figured this picture got the point across quite effectively. And so I want to talk about like, why is AI harmful in organizing? The general advice I'm going to give you here to spoil it, right, is to say that I'm very, very skeptical, and hesitant to use any form of AI when it comes to our online world and especially around organizing. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. So, first of all, is that when we're talking about online organizing, we know that having accurate information is very, very important. If we're supposed to be educating people, if we're supposed to be spreading awareness, these are core tenets of what online spaces are for. And we just know that AI has been shown to just straight up lie to people, right? Like ChatGPT does not, you don't, if you check those sources, sometimes they're just like fully make believe, that they don't give you the answers that you're looking for, things that are peer reviewed. And so, for the basis of just having and spreading good information and good knowledge amongst people, there's a problem there. And that's separate from the infrastructure of AI that has a whole bunch of other concerns, right? Like, we're talking more about the water that it takes to cool AI infrastructure, that we know people have to. First of all, artists and people whose work is taken by AI and churned out for free, and people who work in training the AI systems, and they are experiencing in many cases like real PTSD from what they're and real trauma from what they have to sift through this machine for. So there's a lot of ethical concerns about the infrastructure of AI as well as its outputs. Um, and then this kind of ties into our point about digital hygiene, right? Because if you know anything about AI, you know that it stores all of its user inputs in order to expand its knowledge base. And so we shouldn't, in my view, necessarily be giving all of our information willingly away to this device to be stored in essentially perpetuity for reasons that we don't know about. And there are companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and others who have already committed to working, for example, with the US military and surveillance services, in order to take like these big contracts with the state. So again, these companies are not our friends. And while AI has been showing up a lot in our daily lives in ways that like we maybe didn't consent to, there are still ways that we can avoid further use, and that's what I really want to recommend here. Um, I also know that, for example, Google, you know how when you put it in and it like shows up now that the first thing is always that like AI piece. There is one of the commands that you can give Google to in the settings to not have AI show up as your first automatic sort of response. I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I should have had it in the slide. I don't know, Sarah, if you know what I'm talking about. Amazing. So that'll go in the chat as again another way to also limit our interaction with the robot at all fronts, right? Oh, amazing. Yeah, I think Sarah's on it for us. Appreciate it. Okay. Some more ethical considerations. Yeah, incredible. Thank you. So Sarah just threw it in the chat. Modify your search URL by adding this like code at the end. Um, some more things I think about when I think about how do we engage online in an ethical way, in a way that actually supports community. One is, can you include image descriptions? Can you attach transcripts or closed captions to your work so that people with visual and auditory disabilities can access this information? Just like how in, real world, quote unquote, organizing, you have to be really considerate of the accessibility, like the world you want to achieve is the one like you have to action essentially, right? Like that's kind of an organizing ethos. Is that I think that that also should go for online as well. And that a lot of applications that we use even in like social media, mainstream social media, allow us to do things like in Blue Sky, right? You can put image descriptions on anything that you post yourself. It takes 2 seconds. Um, uh, Instagram has auto captions. Zoom has auto captions for you. They're little things that like we already might do in many ways, but we can remind ourselves to make an automatic practice. Should you put and can you put a trigger warning on information that might be particularly distressing for people to happen to encounter online and that they might not have otherwise consented to seeing? One of the things that is like also my pet peeve that my friends and I talk about is when people put like trigger warning and then they go into a thing, but they don't say what the trigger is going to be. It's just trigger warning. And so like again, being clear and specific and deliberate about our language and what we're putting out there. Um, and then this last one is a big one that I'm going to stick on for a second is can you create a plan for disengaging or reducing your engagement from platforms that we know are run by bad actors? So for example, when Twitter, now X, was bought by Elon Musk, there was this like mass exodus to other sort of platforms, either away from like those like you know, small post platforms in general, or towards things like Blue Sky, and to Discord. Movements from WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta, to Signal or to other messaging platforms. And so here is kind of just like a really quick, you know, step by step about how we do that in general. This is vague, but I think is hopefully instructive for people not really knowing where to begin. So is one is just first building awareness. We need to be aware of the platforms that we support with our engagement, and also that means doing a level of research and committing ourselves to a level of awareness and research about big tech, essentially. This is not something that I love. I understand this. I hate reading the tech sections of The Guardian or whatever newspaper I'm reading that day, but I found out some really important information in even glancing at headlines and doing a specific digs over the years, to realize where I'm giving essentially, you know, with my time and my accounts and all of these things, my money to. Once you realize that there is potentially a bad actor that you're engaging with, you can also then ask, are there alternatives? This is the second set of research. And if not, how much are you reasonably able to limit your interaction in the meantime? If there is an alternative, you can start to build your new networks in that place. I understand that part of the reason that people use social media and they use these online platforms, yes, part of it is for pleasure, but a huge part of it is about necessity, about being in connection with people that they otherwise have a really difficult time keeping in contact with. That's where they share things like maybe mutual aid requests, where they actually like need to be able to get these words out to people. So I'm not saying like you're a bad person if you're on Instagram. It's not that. But it's about can we at least be conscious of and start to build infrastructure that isn't so dependent on these services. And then the last is just kind of like this continuous awareness. Pay attention to the platforms you move to, see how those change and evolve over time, see if new future options arrive. Just because there isn't an Instagram alternative at the moment doesn't mean that there ever won't be. And surely if you're thinking about it, other people are thinking about it too. And so building again this sort of plan for disengagement is a piece here. I don't know if anybody else has done a move like this over the time, but um, it's really easy actually, more so than you think it will be in many cases. Sorry, my dog's like, yeah. It's I had a friend, for example, group message a bunch of us about getting off of WhatsApp. They said, "Hey, I'm moving away from WhatsApp. I am trying to limit my interactions with companies that are owned by Meta. And I would really appreciate it if we could talk on Signal, for example. And it caused a bunch of people, and people were like, "Oh yeah," and we're super accommodating to that. And got a new account, and it was like very, very easy, right? And it's now where we organize all of our soccer meetings, for example, instead. And it was just one message that, this person mass sent out, but caused this ripple effect in a positive way. So just an example. Um, Again, ethical use of the internet doesn't mean amassing engagement. It means engaging well. And there's a reason it feels fake when you see like mega influencers talk about their followers like their community. Um, it's because community knows each other. Community shows up for each other online and offline where possible. And so I mentioned already sharing mutual aid, citing your sources. There are mechanisms that you can use the internet with to build reciprocity and trust. And you can do those things also without having to give away unnecessary information or becoming enmeshed with people. So I'm also, in saying this, not suggesting that you give your whole life into the internet so that people trust you. I'm saying that you choose intentionally what interactions you do have online. Um, okay, how are we feeling? Good so far, folks? Thumbs up, anybody? Or anything we want to sit and talk more about? Yay. Okay, I'm glad. Beauty. So I'm coming up into like the last little section here, plus the resource share. And then we'll have like some time for dialogue. So if you have any questions you want to ask, you can also throw them in the chat whenever, and I can come back to them at the end section as well. Thanks, Alexis. Heart. Okay. So big piece, managing and avoiding burnout. We've talked a little bit about like managing your digital safety, like with the infrastructure of the internet. I would consider ethical engagement like a sense of like spiritual safety and communal safety. And then this last one is managing burnout, which is about like your mental health and often, yes, also your physical health, as another form of safety related to the internet. God, please take our phones away. Felt. Oh man. I know this picture where she's like got the like 1% battery on her. I'm like, it's wild. Layers to this image. How do you distance yourself from the world that is in your pocket? Is a big question that I'm have some advice I'm going to tell you, but also I will let you know in advance that I am an imperfect practicer of these things. Do as I say, not as I do. And so let's see what some of that might be, anyways. Um, Burnout is so real in many ways. In this way, it's also hard when the source of our drainage is so accessible and can be made to feel so essential. If we're not online, it can be something as small as like feeling like you're missing out in the conversation, the social conversation of the moment. I had this happen to me the other day where for work, for example, I do like a lot of commentary on like the news and on TV. And so that means my phone's always going off with news alerts, and I feel like I'm always on because staying up to date is part of the job. And then I even like I was on a TV show the other day where they wanted to talk about, that Coldplay concert guy. And I hadn't seen it. I had no idea it was even a thing. And everybody was like, "Oh my God, you haven't seen this? It's everywhere." And I was like, "What?" And I'm in a mad dash scramble to like read everything about this and see it. And so this is how we again come to be so dependent and be is so essential to our lives in some ways that are avoidable, in some ways that are not. And I think also within activist circles, there's this feeling like if we put our phones down, we're willfully making ourselves ignorant, and that we are shutting ourselves off from essential information, and that is an injustice to our causes, right? Um, and that feeling is one that is really heavy to deal with, and I think just perpetuates this cycle of burnout once again. And I have to believe that it doesn't have to be that way, right? that you can play a role in online organizing. First of all, that doesn't require social engagement, that you can be online, use these devices without having to be responsive to every piece of the news cycle and every message that comes in and every DM. That so much of our organizing, if you've ever planned something online to then translate to in person, happens like how much of the world do you think has changed in a Word doc? Like it's actually probably a lot, and that there's a lot of ways that you can engage with it that is still, for your purposes and for your causes, but again, has limits. And so people I know have taken up, for example, like having their phone like applications lock at certain times and lock themselves out of it as like a very a very direct way of limiting their engagement in specific parts of the internet, right? Like it's not like they lose their phone, but we recognize the things that especially drain us. Um, it also the basis of this is that you have to be able to ask yourself, what is my trigger that tells me I'm becoming overwhelmed, that I am becoming burnt out. I was talking to my friends about this, and she's like a big social butterfly. She's always planning dinners and events for the groups and stuff like that. And she said for her, it's when she feels like messaging people back is becoming a chore, is like her sign to herself that she's like, oh, like something's wrong. I need to take a break. I need to recharge, because I don't often feel this way, or I don't always feel this way when I'm at my best. So it's a question for all of us to ask ourselves. And I don't know if anybody knows off the top of their head or wanted to share, but it's like, what is my personal trigger that tells me I'm overwhelmed? Um, I can give you a second to sit, to reflect. Like I can't keep up. Mm. Like the idea of and like looking at the emails and the little red notifications that are on everything, you're just like, oh my God. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, for me, when I start procrastinating too, like things that I would sometimes be so on top of and like have no hesitation doing, feel like that they're taking forever. Um, the other part of this ask is, then once I know the things that trigger me, what do I actually need to be able to meaningfully recharge myself? Um, I'll share this as like also just a piece of community advice that I threw out there. But I have yet to come up with a perfect system related to the internet for this. But um, to give you an example of what this looks like, I think this like, what do I need to recharge question and then meaningfully actioning it. So I do a lot of like speaking stuff like this, and a lot of the time it's lovely and fun like this. And then some of the time it's like a very corporate or stuffy or like difficult in some way engagement. And so what I took to doing a couple years ago is I realized that I was like, oh my God, I leave some of these spaces and I'm just so drained. I can't do anything for like the next couple of days, or like I'm ruminating on like what one ignorant person in the Q&A thing said, forever. And so I was like, okay, if there's I started to build what I called like self-care fees into my invoicing, where I didn't necessarily say it all the time or break it down specifically, but I would just for myself say, okay, if I'm going to go and do this, am I going to need like a dinner after with my wife to just like decompress? What would the cost of that be? Am I not going to be able to work the next day because I'm going to be so like so still caught up in that moment? What would be the cost of a day's missed work afterwards that I can just rest without feeling the economic pressure? Um, and so it was this way I've built in for myself in like one type of engagement, to try and mitigate some of that burnout. Ooh, I'm glad folks like the self-care fees. Yeah. Um, and so, yeah, if I think about that, what do I need? I need to be able to put my laptop away maybe altogether and just like not even look at it for a couple days. And how can I create the conditions to do that? That might be my planning in a way to mitigate burnout. I'm still working on it in that regard, but there you are. So, this is from this book called The Activist Handbook. And these are two quotes that I think really are very sage pieces of advice. And they point out that, as with any long term project, you may need a little more than immediate success to sustain your enthusiasm. You need perseverance and faith to get through the long, hard times. So that's general activist wisdom, right? Like, is that whatever, when you first come into an issue or a cause, I feel like a lot of people know this, is that you come in and you're hyped up and you're ready to go and you're like, let's fix the world, basically, right? And that can get you going for some time. And then you're like, oh my God, it's years and things are still horrible. And that unless you're building yourself a foundation of sustenance, you will burn out very, very quickly. And so they add that successful social change activists learn to be the tortoise rather than the hare. They recognize that looking after yourself and your family is important. And there's a climate activist named Chie who talks about this a lot. They're from South America, and they said, like, for example, the work that they do is around supporting Indigenous women. And as an Indigenous woman herself, what does it matter if she's like beating herself down with this labor, when that's the very thing she's like trying to preach to other people, right? Is protect Indigenous women, and she can't even do that for herself because she's dedicated herself to this cause, to the point that it's harming her, and not putting any sort of protections or foundations of sustenance in place, like we're mentioning. So this is me beating the nail on the head again, just to say, take your burnout seriously and really reflect on like what it is you need in order to move through it in a good way. Um, Generally, I've given you so much homework. I've instructed you to make so many checklists. One of like your values, what type of organizers do you want to be? Vision board it if you must. This will help you decide how you engage with others, how you can use the internet as your tool, right, to best serve you. It's that strategy piece that we were talking about. I gave you some ethical engagement questions. Are there more ethical tools we can use? Can we make our work more accessible? How generally are we building trust online in an authentic way? Avoiding burnout, which we talked about, and digital hygiene. How can we do all of these things? So I just want to take, oh, and this is my like last reminder and takeaway for myself and all of you, is that at the end of the day, your Instagram account doesn't organize, people organize. And so if this is something that connects us to people, great. But that we have to be aware of so many different things like we've been talking about for the last hour or so. Um, and like I mentioned as well, our online worlds, like our in-person ones, are inextricable from systems of capitalism, colonialism, other dominating systems. Sarah started us off this way, right? Talking about colonialism and the internet. And so it's impossible to create a perfectly effective, ethical, empowering online space, but we do have best practices. We can develop them, we can share them, and it can make it a lot less daunting to deal with the enormous, enormous sort of intersections that we're working with. So here are some resources, like I mentioned. I want to point out here, I'm going to go here so that I can click on the links better. But there's a bunch of different things here. So this was one I want to show you first. And so it's a lot of those, like it's a downloadable PDF that asks you a lot of those reflection questions that I was also prompting you to ask. Some of them are related to digital safety, some of them are related to other parts of organizing. But if you wanted to take some time, yourself beyond just this workshop to actually do that, then hopefully this is something that can that can make it a little bit easier for you to get started. Another thing here is the burnout scale. And so this is an online quiz from this organization called the Burnout Project that are trying to convince people to take burnout more seriously. And they have like all of these different sort of factors that might be related to burnout, right? And you basically do this quiz, and they'll tell you not only like not just a yes or no, are you experiencing burnout, but clinically what that would indicate to them on the level of burnout you're facing. Like, are you getting to a place where you might have to start thinking about it, or are you deep in the pits and you need like some immediate sort of transformation in your ways you're working, right? So having again some guidance on that reflection piece is helpful. Um, if you're interested specifically on like the rules that Canada has and the laws that Canada has around digital safety, so Canada has its own, first of all, digital hygiene checklist. So you can download this and do it a once a month thing or put a reminder in your phone. And I also have links here to Canada's digital charter and the laws that we have around the internet. So there's a bunch of different things here. The Activist Handbook, another really cool one. There's like over 450 guides on a million different things relating to activism that you can research. So hopefully somewhere in this resource list is something that can help you if you want to get more into it. But yeah, I think that's everything for me. So I'll stop sharing and yeah, we have about 20-ish minutes, I think, to have a discussion if you'd like. So thanks so much for showing up, folks.